I was never the kind of man who doubted his own home. My house was my castle, my sanctuary. I paid for it. I built a life within its walls. I kissed my wife in the morning before leaving for work, and I came home to her every evening, never questioning what happened in between. I trusted Jessica. Implicitly. I was the kind of fool who believed that real love was unshakable. That if I gave her everything, she would never have a reason to look elsewhere. That belief cracked the day I found a half-empty wine glass in the living room. I had been out of town for 2 nights on a work trip. When I got back, the house was spotless, too spotless. Jessica always kept things neat, but this time it was unnatural. Like someone had scrubbed away more than just dust. It took me a while to notice the glass. It was sitting behind the couch, half filled with red wine, a faint smudge of lipstick on the rim. Jessica never drank red. It gave her headaches. I picked it up, turning it in my hand. The wine had gone stale. It had been sitting there for at least a day. Maybe 2. When she got home later, I held it up. "Did you have company?" She barely glanced at it before tossing her purse onto the table. "Oh, yeah. Emily stopped by." Emily. It wasn't unusual for our daughter to visit, but something felt off. I wasn't sure why until I saw her the next day. Emily was acting weird. Her wedding was only weeks away and she should have been glowing with excitement, but when I walked into the coffee shop where we were supposed to meet, she looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I barely had time to sit down before she blurted out, "Mom didn't want me to tell you." Those words slammed into me like a truck. I leaned forward, my heart thudding. "Tell me what?" She hesitated, chewing on her lip. I can't." I could see it in her face. She wanted to, but something or someone was stopping her. "Emily." My voice was steady, but my stomach churned. "I need you to be honest with me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Dad," she swallowed hard. "I love you. I do. And that's why I can't." She left before I could get another word out. I sat there in silence, my coffee untouched. My own daughter, not Mark's, not that bastard's, was keeping something from me. I felt sick. That night, I didn't sleep. Jessica curled up next to me, her body warm against mine, but I was ice. My mind kept circling back to that wine glass, to Emily's guilty expression, to every little thing that hadn't made sense over the past few weeks. The next morning, I made up my mind. I needed answers. And I was going to get them. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was staring me right in the face, laughing at me while I refused to see it. That wine glass, Emily's reaction, these weren't coincidences. My gut twisted with unease as I left for work that morning, but I didn't go to the office. I needed clarity. I needed to stop pretending that everything was fine. Instead of driving to work, I parked my car at the end of our street, out of sight from the house. I waited. Jessica had the day off. She told me she was going to run some errands, but something in my bones told me that was a lie. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I was being paranoid, maybe I was losing it, but when her car pulled out of the driveway, I knew I had to follow. She didn't go to the store. She didn't go to the salon. She drove across town, straight to a house I recognized too well. Mark's house. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. I watched as she parked, took a quick look around, like she was checking to make sure no one was watching, and then walked up to the front door. She didn't knock. She just walked inside. Like she belonged there. I sat frozen, my mind refusing to process what my eyes had just seen. Jessica, my wife, walking into the home of the man she claimed to despise. Minutes passed. Then an hour. My thoughts spiraled in 1,000 different directions. Maybe she had a reason to be there. Maybe Emily needed her to pick something up. Maybe no. I wasn't going to lie to myself. Not anymore. I was done being the fool. I got out of my car. Walked straight to the door. My hands were steady, even though my insides felt like they were caving in. I didn't hesitate. I turned the handle. It was unlocked. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. I could smell the wine. I could hear their hushed voices in the next room. The low murmur of conversation between 2 people who had no reason to whisper unless they were doing something they shouldn't be. I didn't call out. I didn't make a sound. I moved slowly, deliberately, down the hallway toward the voices. "You need to be more careful," I heard Mark say. His voice was smooth, amused, like this was some kind of game to him. Jessica's voice came next, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "Relax. He has no idea." I stopped breathing. I felt my stomach drop like the floor had been ripped out from under me. He has no idea. I had been married to this woman for 5 years. I had given her everything. I had taken care of her daughter like she was my own. I had trusted her with my entire soul. And now I was standing outside a room where she was laughing about how easy it was to betray me. I saw red. I stepped forward. And then I pushed open the door. Jessica was sitting on Mark's couch, curled up like she belonged there. Her shoes were kicked off, her legs tucked beneath her, one hand holding a half-filled wine glass, the same kind I had found at home. The air smelled of expensive cologne, the kind Mark always drowned himself in, mixed with something else. Something sickeningly familiar. And then there was Mark, reclining in the chair across from her, grinning like the bastard he was, a glass in his own hand. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, sleeves rolled up as if he had settled in for a long, comfortable evening. The moment I stepped into the room, Jessica's head snapped toward me, and the color drained from her face. Ethan. I didn't say a word. I didn't move. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch between us, watching as she scrambled to put her glass down like it was some kind of damning evidence she could erase. Mark, on the other hand, just chuckled. Wow, he mused, swirling the wine in his glass like this was all a joke to him. Didn't expect to see you here, buddy. Buddy. The audacity of this prick. Jessica shot up from the couch, smoothing her dress down as if that would somehow make her look less guilty. Ethan, I can explain. Explain. I almost laughed. Almost. But there was nothing funny about this. Nothing amusing about the way my wife had just been sitting here, drinking with her ex, the same man she had sworn she couldn't stand. I let my eyes flick between the two of them. You can explain? My voice came out eerily calm, even to my own ears. Go ahead. I'd love to hear it. Jessica swallowed hard. It's not what it looks like. I tilted my head, staring at her like she had lost her damn mind. Oh? Because it looks like my wife snuck off to her ex-husband's house behind my back. It looks like you've been lying to me. And it sounds like you think I'm too stupid to notice. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands twitched at her sides like she was scrambling for a way out of this, searching for the perfect lie. Mark, of course, was enjoying every second of this. He leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head, watching the scene unfold like it was his own personal entertainment. Jessica must have felt the shift in the air, the way I wasn't buying a single word she was about to say, because her entire demeanor changed in an instant. She dropped the act, the nervous, guilty wife routine, and replaced it with something colder. Something cruel. Oh, come on, Ethan, she snapped, crossing her arms. You're overreacting. I stared at her. Overreacting. She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes like I was some paranoid idiot making a big deal out of nothing. Yes, overreacting. I came here to talk to Mark about Emily's wedding. That's it. You're being ridiculous. I let out a slow breath, pressing my tongue against the inside of my cheek. That's so? Jessica lifted her chin, defiant now. Yes. I turned to Mark. That why she's here? His grin widened. Well, we did talk about Emily, he admitted, setting his glass down on the table. Among other things. Jessica shot him a sharp look, but it was too late. The damage was done. I laughed then. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. I had spent years believing Jessica was better than this. That she was better than him. But now, standing here in his house, watching the way they looked at each other, I realized the truth. They were the same. Jessica could lie all she wanted. She could twist this into whatever pathetic excuse she thought I'd swallow, but the truth was staring me right in the face. She had been sneaking around. And Emily knew. The thought of my stepdaughter, our daughter, keeping this from me made my stomach churn. How long had she known? How long had they both been laughing behind my back? Jessica sighed dramatically, rubbing her temples like I was the one giving her a headache. Ethan, I swear to God, you're blowing this way out of proportion. I turned to leave, because there was nothing left to say. Wait, where are you going? She called after me, her voice laced with panic now. I didn't answer. I walked out the door, slamming it shut behind me, and for the first time in my marriage, I knew I was done. I drove. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. I just needed distance, space to think, to breathe, to process what had just happened. My mind was a storm, rage and betrayal crashing against each other like waves against jagged rocks. Jessica had been lying to me. For how long? That was the question that ate at me, not at my ribs like a starving animal. How many times had she smiled at me, kissed me, told me she loved me while sneaking off to Mark's house? And Emily. That part hurt even worse. I had been there for her since she was 13. I taught her how to drive. I helped her with homework. I was the one who stayed up with her when she was sick, the one who sat in the front row at every school event. Not Mark. Me. I was the one who had raised her. And she had known. I gritted my teeth, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. My chest ached with the weight of it all. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot outside a 24-hour diner. The neon sign buzzed weakly, flickering between open and O-in, and for some reason, that stupid broken sign almost made me laugh. Like even the universe was mocking me. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. The betrayal sat in my gut like a fist, clenched tight, refusing to let go. And then my phone rang. Jessica. I let it ring. A second call. Then a third. I turned my phone over, staring at the screen. Finally, I answered, bringing it to my ear without saying a word. There was silence on the other end for a second, and then, Ethan, where the hell are you? Jessica's voice was sharp, accusatory, like I had done something wrong. I took a slow breath, my grip tightening on the phone. Why does it matter? A pause. Then a sigh, exasperated. Are you seriously going to act like this? I closed my eyes. Like what, Jessica? Like a dramatic child, she snapped. You stormed out like some moody teenager and now you're ignoring me? Grow up. I almost laughed. The sheer audacity of this woman. I rubbed a hand over my face, trying to push down the boiling rage threatening to spill over. Jessica, I said slowly, I walked in on you, drinking wine with your ex-husband, laughing about how I had no idea what was going on. And now you're calling me dramatic. Oh my God, Ethan, it wasn't like that. Then what was it like? A hesitation. Barely a second, but enough. Enough for me to know she was searching for an answer. For a way to spin this. You're making this a bigger deal than it is, she said finally, her tone shifting, sweet now soft. The manipulation creeping in like poison. I should have told you I was meeting Mark. I get that. But it's not what you think. I let the silence stretch between us. Jessica hated silence. Ethan, she tried again, her voice gentler now. Come home. We can talk. I almost did. Because for some stupid reason, some pathetic part of me still wanted to believe her. But then I thought about Emily. About the look on her face when she told me she couldn't say anything. Jessica had manipulated her, too. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. No, no. The softness vanished instantly, replaced by ice. What do you mean, no? I mean I'm not coming home tonight. A sharp inhale. Ethan, don't be ridiculous. I need time. More silence. Then, low and venomous, if you walk away now, don't expect me to sit around waiting for you. Ah, there it was. The real Jessica. The one who always needed control. The one who could never stand being the one left behind. I exhaled, feeling something inside me shift. A weight, an illusion, breaking apart. Good, I said simply. Then we'll both have time to think. And before she could spit more venom, before she could dig her claws in any deeper, I hung up. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind with flickering hallway lights and a vending machine that probably hadn't been restocked in years. The air smelled faintly of old cigarettes and something industrial like bleach that had been left to sit too long. But none of that mattered. Because for the first time in years, I was alone. No Jessica's voice cutting through my thoughts. No forced small talk over dinner. No tight smiles stretched over hidden resentment. Just silence. And I needed that silence. I dropped onto the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, the events of the night playing in my head on an endless, torturous loop. The wine glass. Jessica's laughter. He has no idea. The way Mark had sat there, smug as ever, knowing he had won some twisted game I didn't even know I was playing. I should have confronted them harder. Should have torn into Mark instead of walking away. Should have demanded the truth from Jessica instead of letting her spin her web of half-lies and manipulations. But I didn't. Because deep down I already knew the truth. I didn't need her to admit it. I didn't need to hear her say the words. She had betrayed me. And Emily. I turned over, staring at the ugly floral wallpaper. Why didn't she tell me? The thought hurt worse than anything else. I could understand Jessica lying because lying was what she did. But Emily? I had been there for her. I had raised her. I had loved her like my own. And she had chosen her mother. I squeezed my eyes shut, but sleep didn't come. When the sun finally crawled over the horizon, painting the world in a dull, washed-out light, I still hadn't slept. My body felt hollowed out, my mind running on nothing but fumes. I needed answers. And I wasn't going to get them from Jessica. Emily was the only person who would tell me the truth. Or at least, I hoped she would. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I walked in. Just an older man in the corner nursing a black coffee and a woman tapping away at her laptop. The air smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. The bell over the door chimed as I stepped inside, but Emily was already there, sitting at a small table near the window. Her fingers were wrapped around a cup, but she wasn't drinking. Just staring down at the liquid like it held the answers to every problem in the world. She looked up when I pulled out the chair across from her. Her face was pale. Her eyes red-rimmed like she had been crying. Good. I sat down, letting the silence stretch between us. I wanted her to speak first. I wanted to see if she would say something, anything, before I forced her to. But she just swallowed hard, looking away. That was enough of an answer. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. How long have you known? She flinched, her fingers tightening around the cup. Emily. My voice was low, steady. How long? Her eyes squeezed shut, and when she opened them again, she looked like a child. Like the little girl who used to beg me to take her for ice cream, the one who clung to my hand in parking lots, the one who had once told me so proudly that she wished her real dad was more like me. And now she was sitting here, across from me, carrying a secret that had shattered everything. A few months. The words came out so quietly, I almost didn't hear them. But when they sank in, they burned. A few months. I exhaled sharply, staring at her, waiting for more. And when it didn't come, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I had no sympathy left. "Not for this. Not for her." "I wanted to," she whispered. "I swear I did. But you didn't." She nodded miserably. I forced myself to stay calm. "Did you know the whole time?" Emily bit her lip, shaking her head. "Not at first. I found out by accident. Mom left her phone on the counter one day and I saw the messages. I didn't even mean to look, she broke off, swallowing hard. I confronted her. That surprised me. I studied her face, searching for lies, but there weren't any. What did she say?" Emily let out a hollow laugh. "That it was a mistake. That it was nothing. That it only happened once. A mistake. Once." I knew without a doubt that was a lie. And Emily must have known too. "Did you believe her?" I asked. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "No," I leaned back, gripping the edge of the table. My knuckles were white. "So why did you keep it from me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, like they were an inconvenience. "Because I knew what it would do to you." Her voice cracked. "And I didn't want to ruin everything right before my wedding." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Right? Because my feelings would have ruined your wedding." She flinched. "That's not what I meant." I shook my head, looking away. "Does your fiancé know?" Emily hesitated again. "No," I scoffed. "So, you're starting your marriage with secrets, just like your mother." Her breath hitched. "That's not fair." I met her gaze, my expression cold. "Isn't it?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no defense. "Good." I stood, pushing the chair back. It scraped against the floor, sharp and grating. "Ethan, don't." I held up a hand. "You made your choice, Emily. You chose her." Her lip trembled. "I didn't want to lose you." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "You already did." And then I walked out. Because I had nothing left to say. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't go home either. Instead, I drove aimlessly, the road stretching endlessly before me, my mind circling the same thoughts like vultures over a corpse. Jessica had lied to me. Of course she had. That part wasn't shocking. But Emily had chosen to keep her secret. That was what twisted the knife the deepest. I had raised her. Me, not Mark. Not the man who had abandoned her when she was a child, who had cheated on her mother, who had left them both behind like they were nothing. But it didn't matter. Because, in the end, she had still chosen her. I didn't even know where I was going until I pulled up outside my best friend's house. Luke. He was the one person I could trust. The one person I needed to talk to before I did something reckless. I killed the engine, sat there for a second, then finally got out and knocked on the door. It was late, past midnight, but it only took a few seconds before the porch light flickered on, followed by heavy footsteps. The door swung open. Luke took one look at my face and swore under his breath. "Jesus, man. What the hell happened?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He stepped aside, letting me in without another word. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in his living room. A bottle of whiskey sat between us, untouched. Luke was watching me carefully, like he was waiting for me to crack open. I finally exhaled, rubbing my hands over my face. She was cheating on me. Luke didn't even look surprised. "Jessica?" he asked slowly, like he was giving me a chance to correct him. I nodded. He swore again, leaning back against the couch. "With who?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Who else?" Luke's jaw tightened. "Mark." It wasn't a question. He knew. I frowned, something in my gut twisting. "You don't sound surprised." Luke hesitated. And in that hesitation, my entire body went cold. I set my glass down carefully, like I was afraid I'd shatter it. "Luke." My voice was deadly quiet. "Tell me what you know." He exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know anything, man. I had a feeling." I narrowed my eyes. "A feeling?" Luke hesitated again. I could see the battle happening behind his eyes. And that was when I knew. I leaned forward, my voice sharp. "How long?" Luke clenched his jaw. "Ethan, how long?" His hands curled into fists. "I wasn't sure," he said finally, "but I started getting suspicious a few months ago. The way she'd disappear for hours. The way she'd make excuses. The way she'd get defensive whenever someone mentioned Mark. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. A few months, I repeated hollowly. Luke let out a slow breath, looking me straight in the eye. I didn't want to believe it. And I sure as hell didn't want to be the guy who came to you with a guess and blew up your marriage for no reason. I swallowed hard, my throat like sandpaper. Did Emily know? Luke asked. I let out a hollow laugh. Yeah. Luke's face darkened. Jesus. Silence stretched between us. I could feel something inside me breaking. I had spent so many years building a life with Jessica, believing we were solid, believing she was mine. But she never was. Not really. Mark had always been there. Lurking in the background. And the worst part? She had let him. I gritted my teeth, my hands tightening into fists. I should have seen it. Luke's voice was quiet. You trusted her. Yeah. I let out a bitter laugh. And look where that got me. Luke was silent for a moment. Then he poured us both a drink. To new beginnings, he said, holding up his glass. I exhaled slowly, then clinked mine against his. To endings, I corrected. And then I drank. Because there was nothing else left to do, the whiskey burned on the way down. A slow, smoldering fire that settled deep in my chest, dulling the sharp edges of my thoughts but never fully extinguishing them. I sat there, glass in hand, staring at nothing while Luke watched me carefully like he was expecting me to break apart right in front of him. I wouldn't. I couldn't. Because if I let myself fall now, I wasn't sure I'd be able to pull myself back together. Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair. So, what now? That was the question, wasn't it? What now? Did I go back home and pretend none of this had happened? Did I let Jessica gaslight me into believing I had overreacted? Did I sit across from Emily at her wedding and act like I didn't know she had helped hide the biggest betrayal of my life? No. I downed the rest of my drink, setting the glass down with a dull thud. I'm done. Luke nodded slowly. Good. The finality of it settled between us, thick and heavy. I wasn't going back. Not to Jessica. Not to the house we had built together. Not to the life I had thought was real. I reached for my phone, my fingers tightening around it. I had a text from Jessica. Jessica, come home. We need to talk. I stared at the screen. I could already picture it, her sitting on the couch, legs crossed, wine glass in hand, her expression carefully composed. She would try to spin this. Try to make me feel like I had been the one to abandon her. I wasn't going to give her the chance. I took a deep breath, then typed out my response. We don't need to talk. We're done. I hit send. Almost immediately, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Jessica. I let it ring. Then another call. And another. Luke raised an eyebrow, but I ignored him, watching as the screen flashed with her name again and again. Finally, I answered. I didn't say a word. For a moment, there was silence. Then, are you serious? Jessica's voice came through, sharp and furious. You're ending our marriage over a text? I exhaled slowly. I'm not ending it over a text, Jessica. You ended it the moment you decided to crawl back to Mark. A sharp intake of breath. Ethan, no, my voice was firm. Unshakable. I'm done listening to your excuses. I saw you, Jessica. I heard you. You laughed about how I had no idea. Do you know what that felt like? She was silent. I clenched my jaw. I gave you everything. I loved you. I trusted you. And you threw it away for him. Ethan, please, no, I cut her off again, my grip on the phone tightening. I deserve better than this. Better than you. Her breath hitched. You don't mean that. I let out a bitter laugh. I do. Silence stretched between us. Then her voice turned cold. Fine. If you want to walk away, go ahead. But don't expect me to sit around waiting for you to come crawling back. There it was. The real Jessica. Not the remorseful wife, not the woman desperate to fix things, just someone who hated losing control. I smiled. That's the difference between us, Jessica. What? She snapped. I stood, grabbing my keys. I don't need you to wait. Then I hung up. Luke let out a low whistle. Damn. That was brutal. I shrugged. She deserved it. He grinned, lifting his glass. Hell yeah, she did. And just like that, it was over. Jessica was my past. And I had no intention of looking back. The moment I hung up, a strange feeling settled in my chest. It wasn't relief, not yet, but it was close. The weight of my marriage, of Jessica's lies, of Emily's betrayal. All of it had been pressing down on me for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. And now, for the first time in years, I could feel it beginning to lift. Luke leaned back on the couch, watching me with the kind of quiet understanding only a best friend could have. He didn't say anything at first. He just gave me a look. One that said, you just blew up your whole life. How do you feel? I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders. I should be angrier. Luke scoffed. You seemed plenty angry a few minutes ago. No, I mean I should feel worse. I said, frowning. But I don't. Luke nodded like that made perfect sense. Probably because deep down you already knew. I looked at him sharply. What? He gave me a half shrug. Come on, man. You might not have known about Mark specifically, but you knew. You knew something was off. You just didn't want to admit it. I let those words settle. Because he was right. I had known. I had seen the way Jessica had pulled away, the way she had become colder, the way she had always made me feel like I was just a little too much or not quite enough. I had noticed the distance, the excuses, the way she always seemed irritated by my presence in a way she never used to be. I had known. And I had ignored it. I let out a slow breath, running a hand over my face. God, I was an idiot. Luke snorted. Nah. You were in love. I let out a bitter laugh. Same thing, apparently. He clinked his glass against mine. You're free now, man. That's what matters. Free. The word rolled around in my mind, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. For so long I had defined myself as Jessica's husband. As Emily's stepfather. As the man who had built his life around them, made sacrifices for them, chose them over and over again. But they hadn't chosen me. And now I didn't have to choose them anymore either. I stood up, stretching. I need to get my stuff. Luke raised an eyebrow. You going back tonight? I hesitated, then shook my head. No. Not yet. I didn't want to see Jessica. Not now. Not when I was still riding the high of finally cutting her off. If I went back tonight, she'd try to get inside my head. She'd try to twist things, make herself the victim, spin her manipulations into something that almost sounded believable. No. I wasn't giving her that chance. But eventually, I would have to go back. Because my life was still in that house. My clothes, my books, the things I had collected over the years, the small pieces of myself I had left scattered in every room. Jessica could have Mark. But she wasn't keeping any of me. The next morning, I woke up feeling clearer than I had in weeks. No knot of dread in my stomach, no forced smiles, no pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. It was over. And now I had to figure out what came next. I left Luke's place after breakfast, driving across town with a singular focus. I needed a lawyer. If Jessica thought she was going to drag me into some long, drawn-out war over the house, over money, over anything, she was dead wrong. I wanted this to be clean. Fast. I wanted out. The law office I found was quiet, tucked away in a small building downtown. I sat across from a man named Daniel Foster, a no-nonsense divorce attorney with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. He listened as I laid it all out, Jessica's affair, the lies, the fact that I was done. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. Do you have proof? I blinked. Proof. He nodded. That she was cheating. I clenched my jaw. I walked in on her and Mark together. I heard them. Daniel gave me a flat look. That's not proof. That's suspicion. A sharp pulse of irritation flared in my chest. Are you serious? I know she was cheating. I believe you, he said, voice calm. But in court? It's not about what we know, it's about what we can prove. I exhaled slowly. Do I need proof? Daniel tilted his head. That depends. Do you think she's going to fight you on this? I thought about it. About the way Jessica had immediately tried to regain control when I told her I was done. About the way she had flipped from pleading to venomous the second she realized I wasn't falling for her manipulations. She wasn't the kind of woman who let things go easily. I clenched my jaw. Yeah. She's going to fight. Daniel nodded as if he had expected that answer. Then I suggest you start gathering anything you can. Bank statements. Phone records. Text messages if you can get them. Anything that puts you in a stronger position. I ran a hand over my face. I hadn't even thought about this part yet. But I should have. Jessica wasn't going to let me walk away without a fight. And if she wanted a war, I'd give her one. I left the lawyer's office with a new sense of purpose. For the first time since this whole nightmare had started, I wasn't just reacting, I was preparing. Jessica thought she still had control, that she could manipulate her way into keeping things the way she wanted. She had no idea that I wasn't playing her game anymore. I drove straight to the house. I hadn't been back since I caught her at Mark's, and now, standing outside, I felt nothing but disgust. This place wasn't my home anymore. It was just a building filled with memories that didn't mean anything. Jessica's car was in the driveway. Good. I wanted her to see this. I walked up to the door, unlocked it, and stepped inside like I belonged, because I did. This was still my house, my name on the mortgage, my life inside these walls. Jessica was in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a cup of coffee in her hands. She turned when she heard me, and for a moment her face flickered with something. Relief? Hope? Whatever it was. She hid it quickly, replacing it with a carefully neutral expression. You're finally home, she said, setting her cup down. I ignored the bait. I wasn't here to fight. I was here to take what was mine. I'm packing my things, I said flatly, walking past her. Jessica stiffened. Ethan, we should talk. I let out a short, humorless laugh. We already talked. I shot her a look. Or did you forget that part? Her jaw clenched. You're seriously throwing everything away over one mistake? I stopped in my tracks. One mistake. I turned to her slowly, my blood turning to ice. One mistake. I repeated, my voice dangerously low. That's what you're calling it? Jessica folded her arms across her chest. I told you it didn't mean anything. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. It meant enough that you lied. It meant enough that Emily covered for you. And it sure as hell meant enough that you sat there with Mark, drinking and laughing at me. Jessica's face twisted in frustration. You're being so dramatic. I laughed again, shaking my head. And you're being pathetic. She flinched. Good. Because I was done being the one who walked on eggshells. I turned and headed upstairs. Jessica followed. Ethan, stop. We need to figure this out. I ignored her, walking straight into our bedroom. No, her bedroom now, and grabbing a suitcase from the closet. I started pulling clothes from the drawers, shoving them inside with quick, precise movements. Ethan, Jessica said, her voice tightening. You're not even listening to me. I slammed the drawer shut. No, Jessica. I did listen. For years. I listened to every excuse, every manipulation, every time you made me feel like I was the problem. I listened when you swore you'd never go near Mark again. And guess what? It was all bulls ****. Her face twisted with anger. You're such a child. I smiled coldly. And you're a liar. Jessica opened her mouth, but before she could spew more of her garbage, the front door opened downstairs. Footsteps. Then, Mom. I froze. Jessica went pale. Emily. I heard her coming up the stairs, and before I could decide if I even wanted to deal with her right now, she appeared in the doorway. Her eyes flickered between us, taking in the open suitcase, the tension in the air. She swallowed hard. You're leaving. I zipped the suitcase shut. Yeah. Emily's face crumpled. Ethan, I held up a hand. Don't. She hesitated, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of what this meant. Fear of the damage that had already been done. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I let out a slow breath, turning to fully face her. Emily, I love you. I always have. My voice softened for the first time since stepping into this house. But you knew, and you didn't tell me. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was scared. I nodded. I get it. And I did. She had been stuck between her mother and me, torn between loyalty and truth. I understood. But that didn't change the fact that she had made her choice. I can't stay, I said, my voice steady. Not after this. Emily took a shaky breath. Will I still see you? That question hurt more than I expected. I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted to promise that nothing would change between us, that I would always be there. But I wasn't sure if that was true anymore. So instead, I said, I don't know. A single tear slid down her cheek. Jessica let out an annoyed huff. Oh my God. You're acting like someone died. Emily turned on her mother with a look of pure disbelief. Are you serious right now? Jessica folded her arms, rolling her eyes. He's being dramatic. He just wants attention. Emily shook her head, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You ruined everything, she whispered. For the first time, Jessica looked caught off guard. Excuse me? Emily's hands clenched into fists. You did this. You lied. You cheated. You let Mark back in after everything he did to us. And now you're standing here acting like he's the problem. Jessica scoffed. Oh, grow up, Emily. Emily's face turned red, her whole body shaking. You know what? I knew this would happen. I knew you'd find a way to make yourself the victim. She looked at me, her eyes desperate. Ethan, I don't know how to fix this. I let out a slow breath, the weight of everything pressing down on me. You can't. Emily's face crumpled. Jessica let out an exaggerated sigh. Oh, for God's sake, Ethan. You're not special. People cheat all the time. It's not like I murdered someone. I smiled. Not a kind smile. Not a forgiving smile. A cold smile. You're right, Jessica, I said, voice even. People cheat all the time. Her expression flickered with satisfaction, like she thought she had finally won something. But then I said, and people leave all the time too. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out. And this time, I wasn't coming back. I didn't look back. Not at the house. Not at Jessica. Not at Emily standing there with tears in her eyes, caught between the mother she had protected and the man who had raised her. I had spent years being the one who stayed, the one who chose them again and again, no matter how many times I felt like an afterthought. But not this time. This time I chose myself. I walked out the front door, suitcase in hand, shutting the door behind me with a finality that settled deep in my bones. The air outside was crisp, the kind of cool that hinted at the changing of seasons. A new beginning. I threw my suitcase into the trunk of my car, climbed into the driver's seat, and pulled away from the house that had once felt like my entire world. It wasn't my world anymore. I didn't go back to Luke's. I didn't go back to the motel either. I drove until I found myself at a quiet overlook on the edge of town, where the city lights stretched out below like scattered embers in the dark. It was a place I used to come to when I needed to think. Back before Jessica and Emily, back before my life had been tangled up in someone else's choices. I stepped out of the car, leaning against the hood, my breath visible in the cool night air. I had spent the last few days reacting to Jessica's betrayal, to Emily's silence, to the anger and hurt that had twisted in my gut like a knife. But now, standing here, it all felt distant, like something that had already happened a long time ago, and I was just now catching up. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't even have to look to know it was Jessica. She had already texted me 3 times since I left. Jessica, you're being ridiculous. You can't just leave like this. Jessica, we need to talk. Jessica, Ethan, don't do something stupid. I let out a sharp breath, shaking my head. Even now, after everything, she still thought she had control over me. I scrolled through my messages, stopping at Emily's name. She hadn't texted, but I could feel the weight of our last conversation sitting there between us unfinished. I clicked on our chat. My last message to her had been months ago, some small conversation about wedding planning, about her wanting me to help pick out the music for the reception. It felt like another lifetime. I started typing. Me, I don't hate you, Emily. I stared at the words for a long time before I added me, but I can't be part of this anymore. I hit send. Almost immediately, the typing bubbles appeared. Then stopped. Then started again. Finally, a message popped up. Emily, I'm sorry. I sighed. It wasn't enough. But it was something. I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled back to Jessica's messages, hovered over her name for a second, then finally did what I should have done years ago. I blocked her. The moment her name disappeared from my screen, I felt something inside me loosen. The last thread tying me to her, to this mess, to the lies and the exhaustion and the never-ending feeling of not being enough, gone. I looked out over the city, the lights flickering below, life continuing on as if nothing had happened. And maybe, in the grand scheme of things, nothing had. People cheated all the time. People got divorced. People lost everything and rebuilt. And now so would I. I climbed back into my car, gripping the steering wheel, and for the first time in years I had no idea where I was going. And for the first time in years that felt like freedom.